WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM's Master of Business Administration is designed to accommodate the career needs of professionals across a variety of work organizations. More information at business.udmercy.edu.
Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham, and I'm joined by Malachi Baird from Bridge, Detroit.
Hey, Tia. How are we doing today?
How are you doing today?
It's a beautiful Thursday.
It is. It is. So what's happening on the show?
Well, today we're going to talk about how Detroit has a large amount of vacant land that's designated for industry, a lot of buildings that are designated for former industrial sites as well. And there's an ongoing effort to change the zoning at these sites to reduce intense industrial uses near neighborhoods and new housing projects.
Plus, with the Olympics happening this summer, we'll talk about the Olympic Games and the connection to Detroit's Kronk Boxing Gym and the Velodrome. That's a little bit later on the show, but first up, today, men often feel they don't have positive behavior implement. They are without solutions for how to act in a range of situations. That's partly because parents and teachers don't know what it means to raise boys that are balanced, confident, and embrace their masculinity in a healthy way. So how do we do that? And how do we address the sexism boys and men sometimes perpetrate and create a more positive view of masculinity? To talk about this now, we have Ruth Whippman here. She's been exploring all this in her new book, Boymom, Reimagining Boyhood in the Age of Impossible Masculinity. Ruth, welcome to the Metro.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So you have several boys yourself. You're a boy mom, of course, the title of the book. Why did you become interested in masculinity and creating a more positive version of what boys and men can be?
Well, I have 3 boys, and the youngest one was born right as the Me Too movement was just going crazy online back in 2017. And it kicked off this whole conversation about toxic masculinity and what does it mean to be a boy. And it was clear that we were going wrong as a society on some kind of more systemic cultural level with what we were doing with raising boys. And as a mom, I was very scared. I was a little defensive. I found the whole conversation very challenging. And I just wanted to look into how we could do better, both for my sons and for all boys.
And as a mom, what were some of the things that you were hearing that made you a little, cringe a little bit and say, that's not my reality. That's not what I'm experiencing as a boy mom.
Well, I think it was just this idea that boys and men were like inherently toxic and, they were just destined to be harmful. And I think there are some ways in which we raise boys as a society to sort of normalize bad behavior and think things are okay. And there are some ways that we're not teaching boys those like relational skills, skills of connection, skills of emotions. But at the same time, as a mom, I was like, we can do this. This isn't something that's inbuilt. It's not that boys that we should write them off. So I wanted to have a more positive vision for how to raise them.
Yeah, so you note in the book that intentionally socializing boys is a half-finished revolution. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, because I think we've over the last, generation or so, we've done some great work in unpacking sexism for girls. We've looked at body image, we've looked at oppression, we've looked at, girls doing better in math and STEM subjects and earning more money. And that work isn't finished, but it's almost that the ways that we've been raising boys has been quite invisible. It's just like, oh, boys, we don't need to worry about them. They're fine, and I think that we haven't been able to kind of name the problem for the ways that we fail to socialize boys to be emotional beings, to be connected beings, to have good relationships, to be able to be intimate in those ways. And that's been kind of a blind spot. So I think now is the time that we're really opening up those conversations about boys and how we can do differently.
Indeed. And a lot of boys and men are struggling right now with isolation, loneliness, and suicide, as we said in the intro. And only 21% of men say they received emotional support from a friend within the past week, compared to 41% of women. That's according to a 2021 survey. So in your book, you note that a lot of boys are under-cared for. Can you explain what that looks like and when it generally starts?
Yeah, so this is a process that starts right from birth. I mean, we tend to kind of when we have a baby boy, actually, what I didn't realize, and I found out researching this book, was that a baby boy is born with his brain actually about a month behind a baby girl's in terms of right brain development. So that's the part which deals with emotions and emotional self-regulation and attachment and relationships. So baby girls are born a little bit more mature, a little bit more resilient and independent, whereas boys need a little bit more support with those things. But because of the way that we think about boys and we raise them, we actually do the complete opposite with them. They kind of need more of that kind of care, but we tend to see them as boys as tough and sturdy and robust. And so we kind of throw them around and we roughhouse with them, and we don't really talk to them in the same kind of emotional way and give them that same tenderness of touch and care that we give to baby girls. So it compounds it. It's like they need more, they get less, and over time that builds into quite a big difference.
Right now, we're chatting with Ruth Whippman, the author of Boymom, Reimagining Boyhood in the Age of Impossible Masculinity.
It occurred to me as you've been talking that there's this kind of like reaction, I think, to some of what you're talking about. I guess I'll just be direct. When we talk about caring for young boys, I think there's people who worry about like, I don't know, feminizing or like breaking away from these traditional masculine roles. And it makes me wonder, how far back in our history does that go? Is that a Western idea? Is that an American idea? I mean, is that something that we've really, the idea of there being a kind of historically traditional view of male and female traits, like where does that come from? Is that something you explored in the book?
I don't actually look at the history of it so much in the book, but I think, our ideas about masculinity, we talk about kind of hunter-gatherer societies being, this goes back to evolution. But I think actually our roles throughout history have been a bit more fluid. And the idea of masculinity as it is now is a relatively modern concept.
I just bring that up because when we're having these conversations, there's like a big contingent of people who want to preserve some idea of like what traditional masculinity is. And I don't know like where is that rooted in, So I appreciate that. That's helpful.
Thank you.
So right now, as we're just thinking about everything that you're explaining to us, especially when we think about undercare and just like Malachi just said, that historical balance there as well that we've been seeing throughout most of, if not all of our lives, how does the fact that boys are undercared for play into the loneliness epidemic that we're seeing right now with men? That is, do boys and men have less friendships because they're cared for less, or what's the correlation that you're seeing there?
So I think it all plays into it. So I think that we communicate this message to boys that they're strong, they're tough, that they should suppress their emotions. There's all this research that shows that parents talk to boys in a slightly different way than they talk to girls. They focus more on competition vocabulary, on winning, on, making them proud, that kind of thing. And they talk to girls more in that kind of emotional, tender way. They listen to their emotions more. And I think bit by bit, we don't give boys those same role models in, the books they read, the shows they watch, to see themselves as these fully connected beings. We don't give them a model for how to have those intimate friendships. And we tell them as they get older, man up, suppress your emotions, showing weakness is girly. And I think it makes it really hard for boys and men to connect in a very deep and intimate way. I think girls and women find community and connection in general pretty easy. They're taught how to do it. And I think bit by bit this builds up. And now we're seeing the effect of it, in this loneliness epidemic with young boys, with adolescent boys and with men.
So I definitely want to come back to the loneliness and isolation that we're seeing right now with young men. But you talked a little bit about it, and it's something that I think about often, being a woman, of course, is unchecked masculinity in the way of using different words, like you were saying, or different phrases or different things that are equal to women, but they are degrading to women. So, for example, don't be a girl, like you said, or using a woman's body part as a negative when we're talking about, different things with men. So why is that a part of the performance of being a male, using those terms and using those phrases in order to make yourself seem more manly?
Right. So I think the thing about masculinity is that it's defined by its opposite. So it's defined by don't be a girl, don't be a woman, and you have to be as different from being a girl and a woman as you can possibly be, which obviously denigrates women, and it denigrates the things that women value. So that's obviously harmful to women. It's sexist and it's degrading. But at the same time, it's harmful to men and boys too, because a lot of the things that women value and are good at and have historically focused on, like connection, like emotionality, like relationship building, are really important to psychological health. So if men don't value those, they're actually missing out. If we don't value them as a culture, then boys and men will miss out from those things.
We're speaking about the isolation, and we're thinking about how that manifests in kind of the extreme turns. There's a lot of boys who spend a lot of their time, a lot of hours of their day playing video games, watching pornography, being really online, and in toxic spaces sometimes too. What role is this playing in male socialization and the things that maybe we should be doing to intervene in this trend? And I think about this kind of like pipeline of like alpha male content online too. There's a lot of things that young kids are exposed to.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the screen time thing is a really interesting question because, we've had this whole debate about screen time and how kids are doing, are kind of replacing real life social life with online social life. So they're spending time, in online spaces rather than socializing in the real world. But what we haven't focused on so much is that this is a significantly worse problem for boys than it is for girls of the same age. Boys are spending more time on screens than girls are, and they're socializing less in real life. So young boys and young men are becoming increasingly isolated and increasingly avoiding real life and spending it in a screen-based world. And some of that is relatively harmless stuff that they're doing. The video games, there's nothing wrong with them. But there are these more toxic spaces online. And I think what ends up happening is that boys who are lonely and feeling disconnected are actually finding a sense of belonging, connection, and purpose in these quite toxic online spaces because they're not finding it in the real world.
And right now, many feminists have done an important job of critiquing sexism and sexist behavior. Like you said, you had your youngest baby boy during the peak, the start of the Me Too movement back in 2017. And you write in your book that the critiques took on a bit of an ugly form and sometimes lacked a little nuance there. So if you can't talk a little bit about that and what you mean.
Yeah, so I think sometimes there's this way in which boys shut down really from all sides because there's this old school masculinity norm, which is like, don't express your feelings, suppress them, still be a man, be tough, don't talk about, your emotions. But then there's this also newer critique coming maybe from the feminist left, which is like, boys and men, you're so privileged, you have everything, it's time for you to shut up and be quiet and don't talk about your problems because everybody else's problems are worse. And that comes from a good place in the sense of we're trying to give women and girls a voice. But at the same time, we're not recognizing that this system, this patriarchal system that we live in is also harmful for boys and men. And I think boys and men are feeling shut down from all sides. And I think we shouldn't see this as a zero-sum game. It shouldn't be that only one side gets to speak or only one gender gets to speak. Everybody is harmed by the system, and we should listen to how everybody experiences that.
Here in Detroit a lot, we talk about mentoring young boys and giving them the social and emotional tools to work through their feelings. And I'm wondering if you feel like part of the problem is that men just don't have a lot of the right kinds of heroes right now, and people that are, caring and considerate while still being masculine, and they prioritize friendships and connections and are positive role models. And who would be those people maybe that boys and men should be looking at right now?
Yeah, it's really hard because it's both a question of real life role models, so whether those are friends or family members and all the rest of it, or whether those are role models in the shows they watch, the movies they see. And I think what ends up happening is that girls see so much content which is all about emotions and relationships. And I know this from having boys. If you just let the Netflix algorithm do its thing for a young boy and you don't intervene, all they see is stories in which, there's a hero, there's a villain, a good guy and a bad guy, there's a battle, someone dies and someone's crowned a hero. So there's none of that relationship stuff that how you deal with real human beings, how you track somebody else's emotions, how you think about, will I disappoint somebody? How will this impact on somebody else? Which is the kind of content that girls really receive as standard. So I think as parents, we need to just name that problem and think about it and think about how we can expose boys to better stories about themselves where they can see themselves reflected in those roles.
Ruth Whippman is an author of the new book, Boymom, Reimagining Boyhood in the Age of Impossible Masculinity. Ruth, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro today.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Coming up, we'll discuss what the city is doing to prevent big industry sites from sitting near neighborhoods. Is that right, Malachi?
That is right.
All right, cool beans. It's coming up on the Metro. Welcome back to the Metro here on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Malachi Barrett. All right, so when you walk around Detroit, you probably notice industrial buildings. That's how the city grew up in the 1900s. It dedicated itself to big industry, particularly car factories, machine shops, places to create stove equipment, the list goes on. That means today, previous city councils, have zoned many spaces for heavy industry, even though today not much of that is in use anymore. As Detroit tries to build more housing, the city council is rezoning land to prevent heavy industry and the pollution that comes with it from impacting residents. That shift is called downzoning. Here to tell us more is Councilmember Scott Benson, who is working with the City Planning Commission, the administration, his colleagues on the council to restrict industrial use in places where they believe it doesn't really make sense anymore. Councilmember Benson, thank you for joining us today on the Metro.
Oh, well, good morning, and thank you for the invitation today.
Indeed.
So the goal here seems to be to get ahead of some potential conflicts by proactively downzoning properties before an industrial use comes in. It's also to set up sites for future development, residential housing. Just to kind of set the stage here for folks, help us understand how these old zoning designations can come back to bite Detroiters.
So, and Malachi, that's a great question in a number of ways, and I'm sure your listeners are very familiar with the Joe Louis Greenway. And the Joe Louis Greenway is going to be a fantastic pathway, greenway, walking path, bicycling path, non-motorized pathway through the city of Detroit. But because it's also built upon the remnants of old railroad lines, it goes through and abuts directly old residential as well as old heavy industrial. And so now what you have is a greenway which directly abuts heavy industrial, which is not always the best use or the best environment for someone to be riding, running, or jogging through the city of Detroit. And so what I want to do is ensure that those type of heavy industrial uses where you can blend chemicals, where you can have old dry cleaning factories, where you can have all kind of noxious and toxic uses aren't directly abutting this pathway, nor are they directly abutting residential uses. And you've got a number of those examples and solutions that we've been able to implement within the city of Detroit and through city council in recent memory.
So industrial zoning, basically, if you've got a property that is zoned with the correct designation, I'm trying not to use a lot of jargon here for people that are not familiar. Basically, it allows a kind of a group of like by right uses. So if somebody owns that land, they don't necessarily need city permission to put something there. The city can't stop them. They also don't really need to notify residents that they're doing that, right?
Yeah, Malachi, I'm going to unpack that just a little.
Please.
So in zoning parlance, you'll have different zoning districts, like you'll have a residential, you have an R1, that's residential. That's the lowest density residential. It's for larger homes. It's for front yards. It's for kids playing. You don't want uses that are going to conflict with that lifestyle. And then let's juxtapose that with heavy industrial, let's say an M4. That means you can blend chemicals there, you can have a concrete crusher there. And then let's talk about those different zoning districts. So in an M4, you'll have what we call by right use, which is what you just discussed, which means that if I have property in an M4, I have 35, I believe, by right uses. That if I get the property, I can just go ahead and implement my business. As long as I get a business license, I'm good to go. if I have, there's also something called a conditional use, which means that it's a little more noxious, it's a little more detrimental, it has some other ancillary impacts that could have a negative impact on your lifestyle. So the community should have a say. And a conditional use means there's got to be a public hearing before that use can be approved. And so in an M4, there are just so many by right industrial uses that it makes it really difficult for the community to have a quality of life that they want. Like, say, you can have a concrete crusher, by right use in an M4 district. You can have a chemical blending plant, by right use in an M4 district. But now let's look at an M2 or an N1. Those are more light industrial. You can't have those heavy chemicals. You can't have those heavy dust or particulate matter causing manufacturing processes there. You're looking for an M2, and that's more compatible with the residential. And so if you got an M1, you can have a mixed-use development not too far from there, and that will work because it's not heavy industrial. Now, you don't want to have a mixed-use development next to a chemical processing plant, nor a concrete crusher, just because it's not the lifestyle that your tenants are going to want. So you need to look strategically at how we're doing industrial. And since Detroit is an old industrial city, we need to look at what was okay in the 40s and 50s may not be so positive nor compatible with the quality of life that we're looking for in the year 2024. And I'm going to say it's not compatible with the lifestyles that we want, which is why I'm really focused on downzoning where it's appropriate.
Councilmember Benson, I'm thinking about what you just said. You talked about the Joe Louis Greenway, the old railway lines, and that's some of the things that kind of brought these things to your attention, to the city's attention. Was it the Joe Louis Greenway that made you guys go, okay, wait a minute, we got to redo some of this thing? Or was it something that was always on your minds?
So it's always on my mind. I'm an urban planner by trade. And so just my history and just my ethos is I want to make sure we're doing good planning and that we're improving people's quality of life. And so once we saw what was going on, it was just really more of a great tickler to say, hey, Scott, let's look to see how we can improve quality of life. But what really brought this to the head was we had a community group that came out against a use. And they said, you know what, you all want to put a trucking facility here, and it's an M4 zone district. I said, you know what, they're not going to be upset about that trucking. They said, what we are upset about is if you maintain this as M4, what could come afterwards? And so I fought the owner. My colleagues didn't agree with me. I said, we need to downzone this. And they couldn't prove to me why they wanted to have the higher level of zoning. They weren't going to use it. So now's a great time to downzone. But when you push them, the reason they wanted to keep that higher level of zoning is because it adds value to the property. The more that you can pollute, the more valuable a property is. And so what they wanted to do was keep the ability to sell that property in the future to a polluter. And so instead of heeding the concerns of the community, and my colleagues didn't support it, that property is still now M4 when it could have gone to M2 and reduced the ability for them to pollute moving forward if and when they sell that property. And so that was also one of the big points that led me to now be more focused on downzoning when appropriate.
We've spoken this before, and you described that as like a pollution right that owners are sometimes reluctant to give up because it's more lucrative for them to have, that availability, whoever they end up selling the land to.
I can make a lot more money polluting. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
We gave people some alphabet soup earlier, but we're really focused on the M4 designation. And 77% of the land zoned for industrial uses in Detroit has that classification. They're rarely supposed to be near residential districts. Broad range of industrial uses are allowed there, including with the conditional uses that you talked about earlier. Things like explosive storage, hazardous waste facilities, incinerator plants, radioactive waste, high impact manufacturing, sewage disposal, tool and die shops, just to name a few. And this is one of those things that sounds kind of boring until you realize the potential impact on residents. And it's interesting to hear that we're going about this in kind of a systematic way now to downzone. We're also working on a master plan process, right? And a big part of the whole master plan is to look at the zoning classifications in neighborhoods. And does that line up with the future of what we think will happen in those places?
Malachi, let me interrupt here. 2 quick anecdotes. Number one, I've had conversations with our planning department who is in charge of the master plan. And while I can't tell them what to do, I've made it very clear. I hope that they're going to be on the side of the people and say, hey, let's look at how our master plan indicates heavy industrial when it is currently abutting residential and how we can downzone that. And I'm also going to make it very clear, we need heavy industrial in certain areas of the city. They're historic, and they're appropriately located away from residential or other lighter zoning districts. But another part is, and this is where the community came into play, when we did the Lear seating on Connor and Gratiot, that was just an old Cadillac stamping plant that had been in derelict and disrepair for decades. Lear said, we want to come in, and it was an M2. Because M2 doesn't allow for you to go to, I think, the 35-foot that they needed, it only allowed to go to 30. They had to go to an M4. Well, they were already M4. They needed to go to 35. Only M4 allowed for that height. They said, you know what, we don't need this M4. We're more than happy to downzone if you give us the text amendment to allow us to go higher. So that was a great compromise, and they moved forward. They've done that several other times with their light manufacturing in the city of Detroit. So you also get responsible tenants and developers who will say, I don't need that pollution right. I need the ability to have light industrial and create jobs. And we can have that type of a compromise and a working relationship that is a win-win for the community. And the community was right there all the way with me demanding that downzoning. And Lear said, we'll do it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about how this master plan update presents an opportunity to be more aggressive on this. Maybe it reminds me too. In 2020, the Planning Commission released some recommendations to update its zoning regulations and basically identified what we're talking about: the need to rethink former industrial land and create buffers between residential areas and non-residential uses. I want to ask about what residents can do who live in these neighborhoods who are either afraid about, a vacant site all of a sudden becoming a heavy industrial because that zoning still exists, or want new housing to come in, but the housing can't be there because of these zoning designations. What can they do to kickstart this process or work with city officials?
Reach out to their city council persons. Reach out to their district managers who work directly for the mayor on the Department of Neighborhoods. Reach out to the City Planning Commission. Every district, every council person in the district has a planning commissioner. Now every council person has one now after the amendment that was spurred by my colleague, Mary Waters, that everybody has a planning commissioner. Talk to that district planning commissioner. Let them know how you feel so that it gets back to their council person. Let us know and participate in the master planning process, which is going on right now. And also, but the other part is they have to stay engaged and understand where to find the zoning district where they currently live, which can be found on the city's webpage. If you look up the zoning maps, that will pop up and you can click on there, and it's a big graphic map of where you are with every overlay zoning district on a block-by-block basis. But it does take some digging, but you have to have the basic requirement that the basic requirements that you have to go look for, and then talk to people, talk to your elected officials and your appointed officials, and we can help you. And I hear from my community all the time about where they want something downzoned or upzoned, or they're looking for new jobs. And I've been very clear. I am about jobs, and more jobs, but I'm also about public health, safety, and welfare for our residents. And I'm a firm believer, and I can prove success, that you can find a good balance between the two.
We're going to have to leave it there for today. That was Councilmember Scott Benson, who represents District 3 on Detroit's northeast side. Councilmember Benson, thank you for joining us today on the Metro.
Thank you all very much. This has been a pleasure. Love the DET. Have a good day.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. You just heard from Malachi Barrett of Bridge, Detroit. Today, partly cloudy skies with a high of 79 degrees. Tomorrow, Friday, have a high of 80 degrees with sunny skies. And Saturday, enjoy nice weather with mostly sunny skies, highs in the lower 80s. Sunday, starting to see a heat up, getting warm again, 86 degrees, mostly cloudy with a chance of rain. However, coming up, we're talking boxing. We're talking boxing, Malachi.
We're going to do a little rope-a-dope.
A little rope-a-dope.
The Olympics are coming, and we're going to talk about some connections to Detroit, the historic Kronk Boxing Gym.
Indeed we are. And that's coming up next on The Metro. It's The Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham.
And I'm Malachi Barrett.
And for me, Malachi, once the Summer Olympic Games kick off, I mean, I'm just like, USA, USA. We're watching the Olympic Games. And I don't know. Do you feel the same way when you watch the Olympics?
I mean, I love the Olympics. It's such a spectacle. I love all the weird sports. I love seeing all the small, obscure countries put their best foot forward and win some medals.
Yeah.
I mean, we're the top dog, though, in the Olympics. People need to know it. The world needs to know our basketball players are about to run roughshod over the world.
I don't know, because South Sudan almost really gave it to them, and that was something that was interesting to see them kind of go against the ropes. And they have 40-year-old LeBron James just killing it.
Yeah, that's a 40-year-old man out there.
Okay.
Just so people know.
Yeah, it's insane to see. But so we talked a little bit about it. You just talked a little bit about some of those obscure sports. What sport do you think you would perform well in?
I mean, I am out on Belle Isle playing softball once a week, so maybe I'd be okay at softball. I don't know. These old bones don't move as well as they used to. Maybe some speed walking would be a little bit better.
Okay, all right, you're right.
Shimmy those hips.
No, I took that class in college, so I do know how to speed walk. And if you see me out and you see that, it's all in the hips, yeah, I'm speed walking right now. But speaking of the Olympics and the Olympic Games, boxing is one of the oldest contests in the Summer Olympic Games. And just like Motown and its musical artists, Detroit has produced some of the world's greatest in the sport. Kronk Boxing Gym has had a hand in producing those athletes. The founder, Emmanuel Stewart, trained gold medalist Steve McRory and world boxing champion Lennox Lewis. Kronk Boxing Gym has been out in Westland, but now is planning to open a new gym in Detroit in the next few months. Now, to discuss the new plans and what's going on with the gym today, we have on the phone line 1, John Lepak. He grew up in Detroit, trained many boxers, and is now Kronk Boxing Gym's Chief Operating Officer. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Hey, good morning, guys. And I just want to start by saying thank you so much for shining a light on all things Detroit, especially in a day and age where there's so many nationally syndicated shows. It's just refreshing and exciting for me as a native Detroiter to hear what you guys are doing, again, to support all things Detroit.
You're going to make me a blubbering mess right now. As a Detroiter hearing that, this is going to make me blubbering mess right now, but I'm going to try to keep it going, John. Okay. From Dearborn on line number 2, competed in the 1992 Olympic trials and has 19 wins, 3 losses in his professional boxing career. We're joined by Tarick Salmaci. Hello, Tarick.
How you doing, Tarick?
Tarick.
How you doing?
Thank you so much for that pronunciation. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so John, you're moving to a new permanent home in Detroit. Talk about what caused this change.
Well, Kronk was dormant for some time. Unfortunately, there was a flood at the last Detroit location that was under the management of Emmanuel's wife, Miss Marie Stewart, and his daughter, Sylvia Stewart. And took a couple of years. They regrouped out in Westland and formed an amazing nonprofit youth program for kids ages 8 to 18 with a gentleman out there who was a former boxer and athletic chairman himself. And now the time is right. So I was brought back into the picture and assembled a solid group of business-minded individuals. And for me, it's a natural. We want to get back to the city of Detroit, and Kronk belongs in Detroit, and it is a part of the community, and we're looking forward to becoming Detroit's next franchise and rebuilding the dynasty.
I love that. Could you go into the original location and some of the things that you all were able to produce when you were in Detroit?
Kronk was a pillar in the community first and foremost. It allowed kids like myself and Tarick a place to get off the streets, a place where, in many cases, parents couldn't afford to send their kids to other programs. So by being a city rec center, again, it gave us a chance to not only just box, but there was a swimming pool, there were after-school programs, there were programs for seniors. So it really was a gathering place for the community, far beyond just a boxing gym.
Yeah, and Kronk's trained a number of talented boxers throughout the years. What do you see as Kronk's role in the community beyond being a part of boxing? You talked a little bit about after-school programs and different things like that. So what do you see the role of Kronk in the community?
That's a great question. And I think it leads to, Emmanuel's original vision, where we know that all the kids that come in the gym are not going to go on to Olympics or professional success, or even in some cases Hollywood success, which Tarick has experienced all three. And with this new partnership that I am not in a position to expose too much today, but I'll share with you a little that we will have a very strong component in making sure that we have job training skills, providing job opportunities, community involvement with parents. We want to work very closely with the mayor and his administration on playing a part in helping reduce gun violence and conflict resolution again. And just we really want to be a part of the community in all aspects.
And John, just sticking with you for one more question, because you talked about job training and opportunities and different things like that. I'm thinking about the connection between the city of Detroit, of course, boxing, and then just the importance of making sure that young boys and women as well, but young men have this space and this place. We talked a little bit about it earlier today with an author of Boymom, a new book that's out. And if you could just talk about having that space where young men can go and have a community.
Absolutely. And it's something, again, that, I think that we need to really get back to. There's nothing wrong with getting in the gym. And like I said, if you don't want to lace up the gloves and you find out that, getting punched in the nose is not to your liking and that's something you want to do, at least you can take away the lessons that boxing has taught people like Tarick and I, with things like discipline, self-belief, confidence, being able to get up off the floor when life knocks you down. And, I can't speak for Tarick, but I can tell you there's not a day that I wake up where I do not apply some sort of lesson that the great Emanuel Stewart and my fellow brothers and sisters at the original Kronk Gym taught me that I apply every day in my life.
And so thank you so much, John, for that. We're going to transition over to Tarick. Tarick?
That was good. That was good, John.
So Tarick, how did you start boxing and training with Kronk?
I originally started boxing at 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
And out of Dearborn at a rec center. And at about the age of 13, I was winning U.S. championships as a kid, winning fights. And Emanuel Stewart kind of recruited me, myself and another fighter by the name of Obakar, who was a top amateur as well, and kind of recruited us to go to the Kronk Gym. And to piggyback off what John was saying, that gym basically saved our lives, all of us. We don't know where we would have been without the Kronk Gym, without Emanuel Stewart. It was a place for us to go and stay off the streets and to go and make something of ourselves. And it's some place where we were able to believe in ourselves. We were able to believe in ourselves because of, I'm going to say it again, Emanuel Stewart. He gave us hope as little kids, as 12, 13-year-old kids, having nothing out there, nobody behind us. He was there, always showing us love and rewarding us. You got a guy, Emanuel, who at the time when I was a kid, Emanuel was still huge in the 80s and 90s. He was a household name in the boxing industry. And he would take his time out of a day. I'll give you an example. He would take time out where he would pick up about 15 of us. We all lived in low-income areas. And he'd pick us up in his gold limousine and take us to the most expensive restaurant in Detroit at the time. And it was Carl's Chop House. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that. But he would take us there. We had our, he'd bring us gifts, trophies, reward us for winning, and tell us you guys can, have a better life. You guys can make it in this life. And he really believed in us. So we were always out there, in a way, trying to impress Emanuel. We're doing it for him. So he had a big effect on all of us.
And
we're trying to bring that Kronk Gym back to Detroit, which is going to happen, and continue the legacy that Emanuel left.
And that's exactly what I wanted to talk about with you, Tarick, is the legacy there. You talked about so much, and I just wanted to expand on it just for one moment with you, is the mentorship, that hero that you had there in place. Once again, we had a conversation earlier on the show today, Boymom, just talking about men and boys growing up. How important was it? You talked about it a little bit, but the importance of having that male figure there that was proud, but also compassionate and showing you empathy and sympathy and all the things that you needed to be a well-rounded individual.
It made us able to catapult to the next level, because it allowed us to believe in ourselves when we had somebody like Emanuel believing in us, when many of us didn't have anybody believing in us. didn't have anybody for us to talk to or to go to for help. Emmanuel, at his home, he had an open door policy. 24 hours a day, you can go to his house. You don't have to call. You just pop in. So you have boxers popping in all day, friends, family, coming in, discussing different issues, visiting, hanging out, solving problems. So it was, it's going to be hard to duplicate what Emmanuel did. Nobody's going to be able to do exactly what he did, but we can definitely, have it continue and to prosper for decades for the future.
And Tarick, what was your experience competing at the 1992 Olympic trials?
Oh, that was an incredible experience. Well, I didn't make the Olympic team. I went, just missed the Olympics, but even participating in it was the top guys in the country. And it was my whole life. I trained from 8 years old for the Olympics.
Yeah.
I stopped myself from turning professional at an earlier age. I turned pro at 20, which is still young. But I could have turned pro at 17, 18 years old at the time. Emmanuel wanted me to turn pro, but I wanted to hold off for the Olympics. And I waited till I was to 92 when I was 20 years old. And, I made a good showing, which allowed me to turn pro and have sign a nice contract, have a good team behind me. And I continued as a pro for 10 years as a professional. Fought 23 times. I won the North American Boxing Organization Middleweight Championship for North America. I was rated 4th by the WBO, 6th in a row by WBC. I was also featured on a TV show called The Contender. It was a boxing reality show. Yeah. Season 1 of that. And then I retired and got into the real estate business, which I'm doing today.
Nice. So, this to both of you, as we're ending the conversation right now, to John and Tarick, just talk about what you all hope to see from Kronk as it continues on, especially as it returns to Detroit. What are the things that you all will both want to see? We're going to start with you, Tarick.
Well, I definitely want to see it come back to Detroit. Right now, it's temporarily, as John said, it's in Westline right now, which is a nice gym, but, it belongs in Detroit. That's where the heart is for Kronk, and it's coming back to Detroit. And they got a great team that came together now, and it's going to make this happen and bring Kronk back somewhat to the way it was when it comes to the professional ranks. Right now, they're focused more on the amateurs, which we're going to continue the amateurs always, but focus more with the professionals as well. John can tell you more. They're in the midst of making it happen right now.
I know. And John, you got 30 seconds or less. Do you have anything else to say about Kronk and any little note you can let us know about August?
I would just like to say this, that regardless if you're north or south of 8 Mile, we're all Detroiters. So we got to stand up. We're going to bring this brand back. We're going to continue the legacy of the great Emmanuel Stewart. The Kronk dynasty shall return. We shall crown multiple world champions and Olympic champions in the future. And we're going to work very hard to put Kronk back in the community and build champions outside the ring as well.
Thank you so much, Tarick.
Hallelujah to that.
Thank you so much to both of you, Tarick. Salmaci is a former boxer and participated in the 1992 Olympic trials. Thanks for joining us on the Metro. And John Lepak is the Chief Operating Officer for Kronk Boxing Gym. Thank you both once again for being here, and good luck with everything.
God bless.
Thank you for having us.
Coming up, we're going to discuss what's happening at Detroit's Velodrome this summer.
Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham, and all week I've been joined by Bridge Detroit reporter Malachi Barrett. Malachi, thanks for being here with us this week.
My pleasure. It's been an absolute blast.
I was going to say lit, but then I just said it. It's been lit. Okay. So when you think of the Olympics, Malachi, what sport comes to mind?
Well, it was really interesting to hear about boxing and rebuilding the dynasty in Detroit. I feel like, now it's kind of either track or swimming. The gymnastics, I think, are always really fun to watch. There's another sport we want to highlight here, and that is cycling. Detroit's Lexus Velodrome, you've probably seen it along the highway, along 75, right?
Yeah.
It's had a hand in supporting the training of track cycling Olympian and Canadian Dylan Bibick. The Velodrome also hosts several other events of note, including skating and cycling classes. And we're going to hear more about all that goes on at this big sports complex. So we have Dale Hughes here to talk about it. Dale is the executive director of the Lexus Velodrome. Dale, welcome to the Metro.
Well, glad to be here. Glad to talk to you guys.
So give us an overview of what goes on in the Velodrome. I've been by it a million times. I've always been curious about what's going on in there, but I've never actually stepped foot. So what is it? What's unique about this space?
Well, the whole project is quite unique. First of all, we are actually the Detroit Fitness Foundation. We're a nonprofit, and we partnered with the city of Detroit to build this 64,000 square foot sports dome. And we did it all without any taxpayer money. This was all done by donations, and we run it as a nonprofit. Lexus came on board as our naming rights sponsor for the building. Thus, the name is the Lexus Velodrome. And a lot of people don't even know what the word velodrome means. Velodrome is a French word. It basically translates into cycling track. And what's inside the big dome is a 1/10 of a mile oval, banked 50 degrees in the turns and 15 degrees in the straights. And you can ride it for training, for fitness, and obviously you can race it. We have a whole series of pro races that start in the wintertime. Our pro series is really wintertime. In the summertime, we're just completing right now as I speak our Learn to Ride program. And we'll teach in the last 6 weeks, we've taught about 120 kids how to ride their bikes for the very first time. And then we have a Monday, Wednesday, and Saturdays all year round that you can also come in, bring your youngster, sign up at LexusVelodrome.com, and we'll teach your kid how to ride a bike. And over the course of the year, we'll do probably close to 500 kids will learn how to ride their bike for their very first time.
Oh, cool.
That's so great. Once they learn, they never forget, right? That's what they say.
Well, it's one of those things that is, it's one of those things that is, we want all our kids to know how to swim, how to ride a bike, so that they can be safe and have their own transportation.
It's something that folks might take for granted, like those simple skills like being able to ride a bike, being able to swim. You guys have the tagline of bringing cycling and fitness back to Detroit. Why is that important for you guys? I mean, what is really the mission? What's at the heart of that?
Well, our founder was a Metro Detroiter who came back to Detroit about 8 years ago and said he wanted to do something for the kids of Detroit and give them something unique. Thus, he was a cyclist, and so he donated $5 million to build this facility, and we operate it as a nonprofit. So the idea is to offer, we have free walking programs for seniors Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon. Most of all, our programming for kids is free. And then we have training sessions for those that want to get serious. Next week, we have 5 of our young juniors are traveling out to Redmond, Washington for the junior national championships. We expect to come home with some gold medals and stars and striped jerseys. Our masters, which are riders 35 and above, they'll be going down to Rock Hill, North Carolina in 2 weeks for their national championships. And our elite women, we had 3 elite women go to the national championships 2 weeks ago.
Hey, Dale, just really quickly before we let you go, because we're running out of time here, we got about 30 seconds or so. I just would love to know about the Paris Olympian that you all were able to house and home for a little while they were training, the Canadian Paris Olympian.
Well, the Canadian is Dylan Bibick. He was 14 years old. He trained here until he was 17. He won the Junior World Championships 2 years ago, the World Championships last year, and he's on the Olympic team. So we're looking on August 8th at 7 p.m. He will be racing. So you can go to Peacock and check out the racing.
Very cool. Thanks, Dale. I wish we had some more time. Dale Hughes is Executive Director of the Detroit Fitness Foundation's Lexus Velodrome. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you. Have a great day.
And that is the Metro for July 25th. You can listen online, recent episodes, WDET.org, and make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. The show is also available on YouTube if you like listening that way.
The show is produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, and Jack Phil Brandt. Additional production support by Anil Scott and Sydney Walkley, and our engineer, Nate Bender. Music by Sam Bobian and Will Sessions.
The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. If you like what you hear and you want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at WDET.org/donate.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new master's degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. More information at business.udmercy.edu.